The room was silent, yet it vibrated with tension, a stillness heavier than any storm she had ever endured. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting fractured shadows that seemed to move with intention, taunting her senses. The air smelled faintly of metal and disinfectant, sterile and clinical, yet suffocating, like a trap waiting to snap shut. Every fiber in her body screamed awareness, muscle memory honed from years in the field kicking into an almost instinctual alertness. Her heart thumped, a measured mechanical rhythm, but beneath it, an undercurrent of raw, unfiltered fear pulsed, primal and sharp. He entered, exuding authority like armor, a man who had built his identity on power and intimidation. The kind of presence that could make entire teams falter, if they didn't already know the hidden cracks beneath the surface. She watched, every detail etched into her mind, the slight flare of his nostrils, the rigid set of his jaw, the casual arrogance in his stride. He moved closer, unaware that the room itself seemed to bend around her readiness, a subtle shift in gravity, as if the universe was conspiring to give her the upper hand. Her mind raced, a quiet storm behind the calm mask she wore. Every muscle was coiled, a predator's patience refined through years of discipline and silent observation. The faint scrape of his boots against the linoleum echoed in her ears like a countdown, each step a prelude to chaos. Memories flickered, fragmented and ghost-like, training drills in abandoned warehouses, nights alone in foreign cities with nothing but shadows and instinct, the taste of iron on her tongue during missions that had left her scarred yet unbroken. Each recollection sharpened her awareness, layering the present tension with a cold, calculated clarity. She felt the temperature of the room drop, not from the air conditioning, but from the raw pressure of imminent confrontation. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to move, to act, yet stillness was the weapon now. The captain, unaware of the storm brewing across from him, leaned in, confidence radiating in measured waves. He underestimated her. He could not see the edges of her mind where calculation met ferocity, where experience became instinct, where survival transformed into art. A subtle shift in his stance, almost imperceptible, drew her focus. She traced the line of his wrist, the weight of authority concentrated there, poised, dangerous. And in that fraction of a heartbeat, the world slowed, sound dimmed, and the decision crystallized. Time became elastic, stretching and contracting with every subtle movement in the room. She felt the invisible pulse of tension, a rhythm dictated not by sound but by instinct. Her breath was shallow, controlled, a quiet drumbeat beneath the chaos she knew was imminent. The captain's shadow fell across the floor like a predator marking territory, yet in that shadow lay the illusion of dominance, fragile and ignorant of the storm within her. Every micro-movement of his fingers, the flex of his forearm, the tilt of his shoulders, spoke a language she alone could read. Her mind traced the paths of countless encounters, missions where split-second decisions meant survival, where the weak were left behind and the skilled endured. Her body remembered angles, torque, leverage. Her reflexes rehearsed responses long before the moment had even arrived. A bead of sweat traced the line of her temple, a testament not to fear, but to the raw concentration sharpening her awareness. The room seemed to contract around them, walls breathing, lights flickering, shadows lengthening, conspiring to magnify the intensity of the unspoken battle. And then, in a heartbeat that felt like an eternity, he reached, confident, arrogant, certain that rank and muscle would secure compliance. Her eyes followed the motion, calculating, predicting, and in that infinitesimal space, her hand moved, a controlled strike, precise, decisive, unyielding. The world narrowed to a single point of contact, and power, raw and unfiltered, shifted. The instant her grip closed around his wrist, the world seemed to fracture into slow-motion shards. Muscle, bone, and arrogance collided against a precision honed through years of relentless training. His shock was immediate, a flash of disbelief painted across the rigid lines of his face. She felt the subtle give beneath her fingers, the exact alignment that turned his strength against him, and in that instant, the power dynamic reversed, invisible yet absolute. The room seemed to hum with the sudden energy of dominance, every shadow sharpening, every flickering light marking the moment. Her own heartbeat pounded not with triumph but with the quiet, solemn clarity of necessity. Memories whispered in the edges of her consciousness. Days of grueling drills in abandoned compounds, nights spent alone sharpening reflexes against imagined threats, every scar a reminder of what it took to survive in the world she had chosen. This was no impulsive violence, it was inevitability made manifest, a response etched into muscle and mind, refined through trauma and discipline. He faltered, strength meeting resistance it could not overcome, and the silence became a living thing, stretching between them with weight and consequence. She held him there for a fraction longer than needed, letting the full realization sink in, before slowly, deliberately releasing the tension. The air itself seemed to exhale with her, carrying the echo of confrontation and the unspoken acknowledgement of skill, danger, and control. The room exhaled around her, yet the aftershock lingered, subtle but insistent. Every nerve ending buzzed with residual tension, muscles trembling in the aftermath of sudden, decisive force. The captain reeled in disbelief, the illusion of authority stripped bare in the briefest, most brutal of exchanges. She felt no joy, only the cold clarity of survival, the satisfaction of precision, the quiet confirmation that preparation and instinct had never failed her. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered, as if the environment itself were processing the seismic shift in power that had just occurred. Her thoughts spiraled inward, tracing the scars left by every past confrontation, every betrayal and calculated attack that had brought her to this apex of skill. Memories merged with present perception, a vivid montage of training and trauma, each flash reinforcing her acute awareness of danger, each pulse a reminder that mastery over one's body and mind was the only safeguard against chaos. The hum of air vents, the distant scrape of boots in the hall, even the faint metallic tang of the room, all became elements of a battlefield she navigated with surgical precision. And in the silence that followed, she realized that control was both a burden and a refuge, that power exacted responsibility, and that in moments like these, clarity was forged in the crucible of fear, resolve, and instinct. The air hung thick with unspoken acknowledgement, a battlefield frozen in the instantaneous recalibration of strength, dominance, and consequence. The aftermath was a fragile, trembling thing, suspended between relief and heightened awareness. She felt it in the subtle twitch of her fingers, the shallow rise and fall of her chest, the way her mind raced even as her body demanded stillness. The captain's presence lingered like a phantom, a reminder that even broken authority carries weight, and that the world was never entirely safe, no matter how skilled she had become. She traced the line of shadows cast by the flickering lights, each one a silent witness to the recalibration of power, each one marking a battlefield claimed without a sound. Her gaze flickered inward, past the immediacy of the encounter, toward the deeper currents that drove her. Every mission, every flash of violence, every whispered order in a dimly lit room, had trained her not just to survive, but to anticipate, to outmaneuver, to exist one step ahead of those who believed dominance could be asserted through force alone. The subtle weight of her own consciousness pressed against her ribs, a reminder that control was never static. It demanded vigilance, calculation, and a willingness to embrace the shadows within oneself. A faint noise from the corridor made her spine stiffen, her senses snapping back to the present, reminding her that the world beyond these walls was relentless, unforgiving, and unpredictable. The storm inside her settled into quiet readiness, a calm before the next inevitable clash, an understanding that survival was a dialogue between mind, body, and environment, an unspoken war waged in seconds, measured by instinct and executed with precision. The corridor beyond the room whispered threats she could almost feel, each footstep, each distant clang, a subtle reminder that danger never rested. Her mind ran on autopilot, parsing possibilities, calculating trajectories, anticipating movement with a precision born of countless missions where a single hesitation had meant death. The taste of adrenaline lingered, bitter and metallic, mixing with a faint antiseptic of the room, a sensory cocktail that sharpened her awareness and slowed time to a deliberate crawl. She reflected on the weight of identity, the dichotomy between the trained operator and the woman beneath the armor. Years of elite military service had honed her body, but trauma had sculpted her mind, leaving invisible scars that pulsed beneath the surface of every action. Her eyes traced every detail, angles of shadows, the slight quiver of dust in the stagnant air, the almost imperceptible shift of light across the linoleum. Every observation was tactical, every breath a rehearsal for the next encounter. Power was a fragile thing, she realized, shifting with the smallest movement, the slightest miscalculation. 1 second, dominance lay with the other, the next, it could be reclaimed, fractured, inverted. And yet, beyond skill and instinct, beyond reflex and calculation, there was a deeper truth. Control required not just force, but clarity, patience, and an unwavering commitment to anticipate the unseen. In that understanding, she felt the faintest tremor of satisfaction, a quiet acknowledgement that her training, her trauma, and her resolve had converged into a singular, lethal focus. The room seemed to exhale with her, the aftermath of confrontations settling into a charged silence. Her pulse, once a sharp drum of imminent action, now throbbed in quiet rhythm, a reminder that life and death existed not just in moments of combat, but in the calm that followed. Every detail, every shadow, every subtle shift of light was amplified, teaching her again that awareness never truly rested. She traced the lines of the walls, the ceiling tiles, the faint scuff marks in the linoleum, seeing in them the invisible map of control and vulnerability. Her mind wandered briefly to the faces she had encountered in past operations, the weight of choices made in seconds, the lives altered by actions executed without hesitation. Each memory carried the sting of loss and the clarity of survival, a complex lattice of emotion and calculation that defined her existence. She could feel the subtle echo of authority, the lingering presence of the captain, a reminder that power could be as fragile as it was dangerous. The room's stillness pressed against her, a weight that sharpened rather than dulled her focus. Every fiber of her being acknowledged the delicate balance she navigated daily, the constant negotiation between instinct and control, between dominance and vulnerability, between past trauma and present necessity. She inhaled slowly, deliberately, knowing that the storm outside these walls was endless, and that each encounter was both a test and a lesson in the relentless pursuit of survival, precision, and mastery. Her gaze lingered on the faint cracks in the linoleum floor, each imperfection a silent testament to past conflicts, to moments of tension that had left marks long after the chaos ended. The air vibrated subtly, carrying the ghost of what had just occurred, a residual energy that only someone trained to notice such things could perceive. Her hands flexed, reliving the precise torque and alignment that had shifted control in seconds, proof that mastery lay not in brute strength but in calculation, anticipation, and instinct honed to perfection. The captain, now a shadow of his former authority, occupied the room with muted presence, his arrogance fractured, his confidence recalibrated by a single, unflinching act. She felt no triumph, only a cold, deliberate recognition that life in her world was measured by moments like this, moments where the balance between dominance and submission could be redefined in the span of a heartbeat. Memories flickered again, fragments of missions past where split-second decisions had meant survival or demise, each one reinforcing the discipline and vigilance that defined her existence. She moved subtly, every step measured, every sense expanded, aware that the stillness was temporary, a fragile interlude in a world that never paused. The flickering lights above cast elongated shadows, turning the room into a chessboard of anticipation and strategy, each piece, the captain herself, the environment, positioned for outcomes dictated by skill, instinct, and the unforgiving calculus of survival. And in that suspended moment, she understood the truth she had long carried: power, respect, and control were won silently, decisively, and without hesitation. The room seemed to hold its breath, suspended between past violence and the quiet inevitability of what would come next. Shadows clung to the corners, flickering across walls and ceiling like ghosts of choices made, of power seized and relinquished in a heartbeat. She stood poised, every nerve, every muscle, every thought sharpened to a singular focus: survival, dominance, precision. The captain's presence had diminished, his aura fractured, yet the room reminded her that threats were rarely contained. They lingered, waiting for the slightest lapse in vigilance. Her mind traced the edges of memory and instinct, calculating, anticipating, rehearsing contingencies for battles that had not yet arrived. The taste of metallic adrenaline still lingered at the back of her throat, a subtle reminder that every encounter was both rehearsal and reckoning. She understood with cold clarity that mastery demanded constant negotiation between fear and control, between trauma and skill, between the instincts that had kept her alive and the humanity that insisted she remember why. A faint hum of movement beyond the walls pulled her focus outward, and the room's charged silence snapped into sharp awareness. Shadows, light, muscle, and mind, all were instruments she had honed into lethal precision. And in that moment, she realized the truth she had always known: the world outside would never wait, and neither could she. The calm of victory was fleeting, the storm eternal, and she was its quiet, unyielding eye.